In this session, want to discuss some of the questions that people tend to ask whenever they are working within an organization, or sometimes it could be that they are practicing as HRs, they are practicing as CEOs, they are working as directors, could be at management level, supervisory level, or at the lower level. So people tend to have a number of questions, even union leaders, amongst other people outside the organization or within the organization. They might have different questions to say what should happen in this kind of situation. So we are trying to address some of the commonly asked questions when it comes to HR processes. One of the things that is also important for us to appreciate, one of the things that people tend to ask is to say what should happen if, for example, the panel members are conflicted in one way or another. Could be an interview panel. So you might find that maybe one of the panelists is conflicted. So could the conflict of interest could come in because of maybe the candidate is related to the panel member, or sometimes the candidate has indicated as a referee the panel member in one way or another. So some panelists to say this is why it is very, very important whenever you have identified the panel members, you should be able to communicate these are the candidates. Maybe do you have any reservations to interview of any of the candidates, or the panelists can now declare, because at this stage the candidates are not there. So but you can be able to ask the panelists if any of them is conflicted in one way or another with the candidates who are there. So from the names they should be able to declare whether they are conflicted or not, because sometimes conflict of interest will come in whereby there was conflict between between the panelist and the prospective employee, and the prospective employee might not be comfortable to sit in an interview where this particular person is in. So you can be able to explore from the panelists to say do they have any negative or positive relationship with the candidates who are there. With this, regardless whether the panelists are coming within the organization or they are coming from outside the organization, we should be able to know that people tend to network in one way or another. Because if a candidate can raise that as an issue to say maybe I was not fairly assessed because candidate, maybe panel member number so happened to be my I was not going good terms with that particular person. As a result, I feel I was not fairly assessed in one way or another. So we should be able to handle that kind of process in a professional manner. So that's why it is always important whenever you are doing interviews to declare any conflict of interest. That's what is very, very important. And also other people tend to ask to say when a job has been advertised, maybe you have stayed maybe 6 months, 1 year without shortlisting, should we use the same applications for shortlisting, for example? Maybe we have to re-advertise. And so these are some of the things which are also very, very important. So as an organization, you might need to have a policy to say, for example, maybe from the time we are advertised to the time we are shortlisting, how long should be the gap? Because there are moments whereby you have advertised today and you might find that this particular person was not sure about his or her contract wherever he was working. But now 2 months, 3 months later, or 4 months later, the contract he was given maybe another contract wherever he was working. So you might find that you invite that candidate maybe a year later or maybe 6 months later for the interviews. He's like, no, I'm not comfortable to attend the interviews. I'm okay now. Yeah, and because that at that time he was interested in the job, but now that interest is no longer there because of the uncertainties that he had that time, or maybe he has just secured a new job then now he feels to say, why should you go? I also go for another interview, for example. So it's always important that from the time we have advertised to the time we are shortlisting, and consequently to the time we are doing the interviews, the period shouldn't be that long. That is very, very important for organizations. And also at the same time, another thing that also need to appreciate as an organization is to say, this is whereby maybe you are doing the interviews, the shortlisting have to be done as soon as possible, because by advertising it means you are interested in that particular to fill that particular position. So why should you delay? If your funds were not available for that particular job, so why did you advertise? I think when you are going for advertising, you should be sure to say we are able to fill this, we're able to close this within 2 months or within a month. Yeah, so be sure that you are trying, but not like you advertise and now you're waiting for the project to start maybe 6 months later. I think that you might not be able to get the best candidate sometimes. And also sometimes it could happen that maybe after the interviews you didn't get any suitable candidate for the position, then you can re-advertise. Yeah, so you might find that you can re-advertise just because maybe during interviews you didn't get the best candidate for the job. Best candidate, when I talk about, people tend to ask to say, how can you not get best candidate when all the people whom you called for the interviews were qualified in terms of the experience and also the qualifications? Yeah, sometimes depending on the way you had organized the interview, you might not be able to get a person that gave you a positive impression in terms of to say can move or your organization or can be a suitable fit for the position. So if you have got, for example, an interview score sheet, you might find that maybe the average score maybe is below the passing mark of that particular interview. So you are like to say, okay, if you have got a passing mark like 70, so all the candidates have scored below 70, then you can declare to say no one passed the interview, then you can re-advertise. And also there are some moments whereby maybe you have just received limited number of applications and now you can say no, we are re-advertising. So re-advertising can be done when interviews maybe you haven't gotten the right candidate during interviews, or maybe you went after shortlisting, you have not. I mean, after receiving the applications, the numbers which are there, they're not satisfying in terms of the volume to say maybe you don't have enough sample for you to continue within the process. Yeah, that's what is very, very important. And another thing also that we need to appreciate is that people need to ask to say, can you publish names, for example, in the media for sake of an aptitude test, for example, for sake of interviews, for example, to say the organization X is inviting the following for an aptitude test, and maybe having 2 pages, 3 pages, 4 pages in a newspaper, for example, or in a general notice. I feel one new thing we should be able to appreciate, these people had sent you their emails, they had sent you their postal addresses, they had sent you their phone numbers. Why not emailing them or calling them, yeah, to ensure? I think if it's about the volume, I think it means maybe the organization is not well organized in terms of organizing information, for example. But we have got secretaries in these organizations who can be able to do mail match, yeah, to send to all of them within the shortest period of time. Yeah, and also they have got organizations have got softwares which can be able to send same kind of information to multiple people at the same time. Yeah, and also maybe to SMS you can send to multiple people within the same time. Yeah, or even you can call, because you have got the responsibility as an organization, or maybe several people can be tasked to make calls, or sometimes people would hire special people to, as interns and all that, just for specifically to handle maybe the calling, all those things, yeah, the reference checks. If there are so many people to be recruited, you can have maybe interns to do that kind of process under guidance of the HR department. This is very, very important, yeah. And also people tend to ask some of the questions that people tend to ask to say, does the dressing really matter? Okay, maybe before I come to issue of dressing, on this one of issue of publicizing names in the newspapers and other social media platforms, you might find that maybe wherever these prospective the applicants are coming from, you can create an enmity between their supervisors and them, because they'll be like to say, no, now you are leaving the organization, or you want to leave the organization. So such kind of they tend to sour relationships, wherever being in the private sector, maybe they were supposed to be supported for a certain trend, even in public sector, even in NGO. I think the CEOs, the managing directors, cannot be comfortable to have a long-term vision of that particular person. So there is lack of trust, and also the relationship tend to sour, to say, no, but because you are leaving and all that. Yeah, so it creates such kind of animosity, and even on that material day of the interviews, or yeah, it is difficult, or the aptitude test, it's difficult for this kind of people to now be able to give excuse to their office to say, because everybody knows that that day is for interviews, and people are looking forward to say, will he come to office or not? Yeah, so even if he is to apply for a leave and all that, maybe the CEO or the management can deny that kind of, cannot approve such kind of a leave, because when you are applying for leave, it's not like it's open. No, they have to approve or disapprove. Yeah, so they cannot approve that kind of leave. And also another question that people tend to ask is to say, during interviews, for example, what kind of dressing can one do? For example, the way I'm dressing now, yeah, you might find that to say, maybe I've even put on a jacket, for example. Can I go and attend interviews, for example? Yeah. So I think one thing we should be able to appreciate is, as a country, we don't have a law how we should dress, for example, during interviews or other things. So that's the bottom line that we should be able to appreciate. But maybe at an organizational level, they might have a policy, so they should be able to share, for example, such kind of information, which is very, very important. Yeah, because sometimes you might find that the way you can define to say this is best clothing might not be ideal to other candidates. For example, even dressing, the way maybe hair makeup, maybe someone has put on dreadlocks and all that, and you might find to say, oh, maybe this is not okay. But have you ever communicated with that particular person to say, maybe this is not appropriate, kind of? But you might find to say, what are you looking for? Are you looking about the dressing, or you're looking for the performance of this particular employee? So are you looking for, so I think we are wasting our time with the immaterial things. But at the same time, I should also be warning candidates to say, you might not know what kind of employers are you going to meet. It's also important for you to dress properly. So when I say properly, we all know what we mean to say dressing properly. I'll give an example. You go for an interview, then maybe for ladies, for example, you have put on a mini skirt and all that, yeah, and you find the panel is all that traditional, that doesn't understand why people put on mini skirts, for example, even just like trousers. The other people say, no, why is she putting on a trouser, for example? Yeah, so you have not to give okay, during interviews, you don't have to give any, people shouldn't have bad impression with the way you have dressed. So it's important to dress very formal and be able to dress appropriately. That's what is very, very important. So whether you've got a jacket as a man, you can put on a jacket, necktie and all that. Yeah. But as I said earlier on, it's not like there's a law that guides that, but just to remove those biasness that people might have over you and all that, you just have to dress it appropriately. But as I said, there's no law that guides that. So it's very, very important. It's up to you to decide how you want to dress or to look when you are going for interviews. But people say first impression lasts. Yeah, maybe how you have done your beds and all that. Yeah. So it's so important that you should be able to even the choice of the clothing. Yeah, find you're going for interviews, maybe you're put on a red suit. Yeah, for example. Yeah. As if you're going for a disco. Yeah, so these are some of the things that we should also be mindful to say, how am I looking during the interview? This is your day, which you can be able, you can now dress appropriately, then After that, you can be able to dress the way you want when they have picked you. Yeah. So another question that also people tend to ask is to say, when I've attended interviews, for example, can I complain? Yeah. Yes, it's possible you can complain. Yeah, if you have observed anything, I think I was mentioning earlier on to say, for example, you feel like the panelist, one of the panelists, maybe you are not in good terms with that panelist, then you can be able to state to say, I ended the interview, but I've noted that one of the panelists, I don't think can fairly score me, even during before the interviews. When you see the panel, you can be able to state that, to say, I don't feel comfortable to be here because of ABCD. So I think they can be able to decide, and I think maybe they can, that particular panelist might be withdrawn and all that. Yeah, but all it depends on how they have structured the interviews, because if the panel is for 4 people, all the 4 members have to be part and parcel of the whole interview. So they have to assess all the candidates. But I think you have raised your issue. You don't have to go with the some issues when going home, but you should be able to communicate at that point straight, because it's your time. Yeah. So this is some of the things that also is very, very important. And also there is also sometimes whereby people can disclose interview results before the interviews. Yeah, this could be interview results, but also disciplinary hearing results and all that. So it's also important that there should be oath of secrecy amongst the members, and also maybe the members who have done that. Yeah, I will give an example. It could be a situation whereby someone has scored number 1, or because the interview panel, once it has made a decision, it will send to management for approval. So for example, at that level, maybe management has not approved that interview, and maybe they've asked for the advertisement of the position, for example. So at that level, for example, you have already, as a panelist, you have already communicated with the candidate, one of the candidates, to say you were successful. Or it can happen sometimes that maybe the references are not all that good. After the candidate has scored highly, but you might find that the references are not that satisfactory. So you might have to go to candidate number 2. So, but yet you have already communicated to the candidate number 1 to say you were successful. And now this candidate is like trying to call you, the organization, to say, I heard that I was number 1. How come I was not picked at that time? So it's important that the members who are on a panel, the members who have been involved in the shortlisting, they should be as confidential as possible. That's what is very, very important, because I'll give an example. You can shortlist, and you might find that after submitting to management for approval, or maybe the CEO for approval, you might find that maybe there are some observations which has been made, and the panel, the shortlisting team has been asked to look at the shortlisted applicants and maybe check with the other candidates. Maybe you had overlooked some qualifications. Maybe that qualification is not accredited, for example. Yeah, so you might have to recheck that kind of information. So once you have checked, you might need to go and replace that one. And yet you had already communicated with that person to say, you have been shortlisted, for example. Yeah, so these are some of the things that which also have to be addressed. And also at the same time, one of the other aspect also, which is very, very important for us to appreciate, is to say, what happens, for example, if one of the candidates, it's only one candidate who has turned up for interviews, for example. Yeah, you proceed to interview that particular candidate. Yeah, so people tend to ask to say, can you interview just one person? Yes, you can interview one person. Yeah, because the idea is to look at how fit is that particular person to take up that position that is at hand. So, for example, if that candidate who has just one person has come for the interview and has just scored above the passing mark, it means he has passed the interview. So, interview in general, we are not comparing candidates. No. When you are doing interviews, you are not comparing candidates. But when you are doing interviews, you are getting someone who is top in the interview room. Yeah, so you're getting one who is on top interview. That's why there shouldn't be any other factor to be used for getting the best candidate. I think the best candidate should be gotten based on, if you had the other reservations, for example, say, no, this one is good at talking and all that, maybe so, then you could have done an interview that was tailor-made in a way, was made in a way that can also be able to assess other skills, not just the verbal communication, but you have used the oral interview. For example, people can do written interview, oral interview, practical interview. So it's all about how you have organized the interview. Then you're going to be able to conclude to say this one is a good candidate. So you can have, it's not like there's a law that says you should always do oral interviews. No, there's nothing like that. It's all oral interviews. People tend to use them because of best practice, but you can use aptitude test. You can do the oral interviews. You can do the written interviews, or you can also do the practical interview. You can give a case study. You can ask someone to go on a computer and do some things. You can give a case and all that. You can do the practical aspect. If it's a mechanic, you can be able to ask him to say, can you fix this problem, for example? Yeah. So you are not forced to focus on one aspect, no, but also you can do other reasoning skills. You can do psychometric tests and other things, just to ensure that you are having the best candidate for your job. So I think my opinion is to say, if someone, after you have analyzed everything, the one who is number one should be given the position. And also another thing, people tend to ask to say, during interviews, should you be able to ask questions like, for example, should you score issues like qualifications, dressing? So to me, those are immaterial. I think focus should be on the questions that you have asked the candidates to, because those other things, immaterial to me. You might be looking at, that's why now those other biases tend to come in, because in terms of dressing, you can not score dress, you can score dressing differently, the way someone has dressed, you cannot be able, even looks, we talk about aesthetic labor, to say how the one looks can also misguide interview panel. These are some of the important things that should be able to appreciate. And also at the same time, there are cases whereby maybe organizations, pregnant women can be able to come for interviews. So one of the things that we should be able to appreciate is to say, how should organizations react to that? Could be a pregnant woman, a disabled employee. How prepared are the interview panel? How is the prepared? So the interview panel should be prepared to say there could be other people who are pregnant, there could be other people with disabilities. You should be able to check, especially people with disabilities. You should be able to check if they have got any disability. This kind of asking is not to discriminate against them, because if you discriminate, it's against Section 5 of the Employment Act, which goes against discrimination, and also the Constitution, it goes against discrimination, but also at the same time, the Disabilities Act tend to guard against discrimination. That's what is very, very important for us to appreciate. But apart from that, you should proceed and be able, but you are asking them just to ensure, to say, what kind of support can you be able to provide to them during the interviews? Maybe you need a sign language interpreter, for example. If someone doesn't speak, for example, so it's deaf, for example, you might need to have a sign language interpreter. So these are some of the things which are so very, very important, just to avoid discrimination. And also at the same time, for example, an employee is pregnant, you should be able to not have biases when scoring, because some of these things to say, no, this position we need someone immediately, so it means when we recruit this person, she'll go for maternity leave. No, there's nothing like that. There's nothing like that. What we need to appreciate is, even someone can be able to work whilst on maternity leave. It's all about how we have arranged, because this person, when she is coming for interviews, she knows the situation she is in, and she can be able, you can now discuss on her plan to say, okay, if we offer you, for example, a job in next month, can you be able to report? Then you can discuss from there. Even when she has reported, you can be able to discuss. And also we should know, this pregnancy is not permanent, it's not for life, it's temporal. Within a short period, she'll deliver, and also she'll have a baby. So you shouldn't miss a skill, experience, that ability. You shouldn't miss that just because someone is pregnant. This is one of them. And even the Employment Act, the amendment of 2021 is trying to promote that, to say providing a conducive work environment for pregnant and lactating mothers. We should also be, as parents, we're also born of a woman, and that is natural. So we can't do anything about it. Let's accept them and let's accommodate such kind of candidates. And also the other thing that we should also be mindful. There's also people tend to ask, to say, how I do what I do on social media, should it have any impact on interviews, for example? So there are some organizations which will go to social media to look at behavior of candidates and all that, how do they behave and all that. No, it's not very, very important for you to be able to canvassing people on social media and see how they are doing, they are behaving, because sometimes how one behaves in social media is different from how he behaves during games, during the job. I'll give an example. Ronaldinho. People were talking about that Ronaldinho used to go out to clubs, for example, but when it comes to football performance, he was performing good. So I don't know. It's here one's life. So you don't have to have control over one's life, but the focus is to say, is he misbehaving? Is he getting drunk whilst in office? Is he doing whatever he is doing? That's kind of the kind of unruly behavior. Is he portraying that in the office? So what one does in his or her private life doesn't matter. People will go to say, maybe issues of divorce, maybe are divorced and all that, then it should affect the candidates. No, those are immaterial. What you are looking for is a skill from that particular person. And also people tend to talk about making a decision, to say who should make a decision for example interview. Should be the panel or management. Should be the panel or management or the CEO. So decision of recruiting someone should be made by the panel. The panel is the ultimate authority to make that decision. So once the panel has made a decision to say, okay, we are recommending this particular, of course, officially they'll say we are recommending, but the decision should come from the panel. Because the people who were involved in the process of the interviews, because these are the ones who had the explanations. Someone who was outside that boardroom, is outside that office, how can he make a decision? Or what basis can he use to make that decision? So decisions should be made by someone who was in the panel or interview room. So decisions should be made by the panel. That's what is very, very important. So what we need to appreciate is when the panel has done, the secretary, someone from the HR would recommend to the management or to the CEO for approval. When they have made the observations, they can ask the panel to relook at the observations and make a decision or make a contrary decision. But they should make the decision, in short, the decision should be made by the panel and not someone outside the boardroom. It's just like disciplinary hearing decision should be made by the disciplinary panel and not the CEO or management. No. If they wanted to make that decision, they were supposed to be made or to come to the interview or disciplinary process or disciplinary panel. So they were supposed to be part and parcel of the disciplinary panel and make that particular decision. And also at the same time, when going to interviews, shortlisting or disciplinary hearing, it's not important. It's not good to have already made decisions to say we are getting this candidate. No, decisions should be made based on how people have explained. And sometimes it can happen that during interviews, you have candidate number one, you are impressed to say, no, this is the right candidate. You might not be able to, you might not give a fair understanding of the other candidates. wait up until the last candidate. So score each candidate individually, then you are able to score the last up to the last candidate, then you make a decision. So decision should not be based on someone. I mean, it shouldn't be made only first glance to say, no, because this one is in place, therefore I don't think there's another candidate who can do better than this one. So decisions should be made by the interview panel and within the interview room. And the first past post, the one who has scored number 1 gets the job. If you had other issues, you would have resolved those during the shortlisting. So I also want to give you a scenario to say, some people tend to ask to say gender, issues of gender, for example. At what point can you make a decision whether to recruit a woman or a man? What is important for us to appreciate is you can only recruit a man or a woman when you have done your gender audit and you have concluded to say we want to have more men or to have more women. So when you have made that particular decision, what is important for you is also to look at your shortlisting. The way you have shortlisted, you can shortlist all women and you can justify to say, because we are looking for a woman, we can shortlist all men, we are looking for a man. That's not inequality and that's not discrimination, because rather than asking men to come all the way from Zuzu to Blantyre for an interview, yet you are looking for a woman, or asking women to come all the way from Blantyre to Lilongwe only that we hear that you are looking for a man. No, decision should be made at shortlisting. Whom are you shortlisting? If you have shortlisted both men and women, then the one who is number 1 gets the post. First past post. It's not law, it's not what, but that's what has to happen. That's best practice. That's also being fair to the candidates, because you have both people to come to the interview and you're asking them to say, now you're making decisions to say we're getting someone who was number 1 or number 4 or number 5 just because he's a man or just because he's a woman. No, that is not allowed within the best HR practices. So these are some of the issues which are also very, very important for us to appreciate it. I think if you are looking for trainings in these areas and amongst other areas, HR, procurement, general management, stores management, team buildings, you can reach out to me through Change Consult Group, www.changeconsult.org, or CCG, or email ccg@changeconsult.org. We can be able to support your organization, functional reviews, amongst other things. If you go to the website, you'll be able to get more information on the services that we provide. Thank you so much for watching.